I am so excited to get this out to the world. We got to speak about anti-Semitism, stuff that's going on in the world, famous people doing crazy things. What exactly is going on? Is there something deeper? And in fact, once Reb Yussie gets started, I have nothing to add to the conversation. It's incredibly deep, and yet we got some practical ideas and some real things to think about and to work on as a reaction to this stuff happening around us. So I hope you come along for the journey, stick around till the end, because I think that's where the real beauty of this conversation is. And I hope you enjoy. So the idea came, I think it's on a lot of people's minds. There's stuff happening out in the world. Very famous people making very public comments from the music world and sports world, like people that in the world are very influential, making some very public comments that no chidushim, it's stuff we've heard before, but they are saying things publicly that the world is condemning because of anti-Semitism, and they come out very strong against it. And we're kind of existing in this where it seems like the world is taking a stance, but as a community, especially like the frum community, it kind of like it happens, but is there a reaction, or is there even a thought process that goes on for us when we're sitting in a world where this stuff is almost becoming okay to say in public to a certain extent? Obviously there's a backlash, but to a certain extent it becomes okay. And what is, how is there something deeper going on here that we're watching happen in front of us, and what is it?
Well, if it exists, then there must be something deeper, right? Because nothing exists that's just simply what we see. I think it's an interesting topic to talk about. But in a deeper way, what is that metzias of anti-Semitism? By the way, I always felt that the term anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic, is itself anti-Semitic, because it means that your person says something against Yidden, he's anti-shame, right? That's what Semite means. Sem is shame. So it's like, yeah, but Esav comes from shame, Yishmael comes from shame, a large percentage of the world comes from shame. So it's like, at least give us the credit that you hate us. You know what I'm saying? No, it's not you, it's the fact that you come from shame. It's like in itself is a sin of Yisrael, they're going to give us the credit for it.
Let's be straight about it.
Yeah, it's
at
like,
least be straight about it. Okay.
Okay. It's a Gaisha term, anti-Semitism. I'll tell you like this, I think first of all, what needs to be said certainly is that we have to thank God, mamish. We have to thank God all the time that we don't experience Sinas Yisrael the way our ancestors did. And it's mamish, in any time people like us, in our generation, our age, and so on, you walk down the block or someone says something to you, or you hear something, or you read something, it shocks you. It's like, whoa, like I find that if it's, and it bothers us, which it should, but that just shows you how infrequent it is and how uncommon it is in our world. And Baruch Hashem, that's mamish, it's a bechin of a nace. Mm-hmm. That's a nace in galus. We should be in such a situation that it surprises us when there's any Sinas Yisrael that's out in the open. That's a nace. It's mamish a nace. So you have to thank God for that. But I'll tell you one thing. I think that the fact that Baruch Hashem and Al Tiftach Peh, we don't live in a world where we're bombarded with sinna, Baruch Hashem. So I think that also gives us the opportunity to sort of analyze it and to investigate it deeply. Because when you're in the middle of a tzara, you don't necessarily have the luxury or the presence of mind to really analyze what's going on. You're just trying to survive it. So when you're not in the tzara, and sort of you can have that perspective to take a step back and to investigate it. So I think the fact that Baruch Hashem, we're not living, like our ancestors did, trying to survive that tzara, which is called anti-Semitism. So I think that gives us the responsibility to analyze it deeply and to understand and to look at it like a sugya, which it is. Everything's a sugya. People are sugyas. Obviously, Yiddishkeit sugyas. Life, it's a sugya. So it needs to be investigated, and certainly there has to be a response. But for the purposes of this podcast, which is the name, what's the Avoda, so the response is not going to be write a letter to your local politician. Maybe you should. Maybe you shouldn't. I don't know. It's not my Indian.
Feeling that wasn't the
That's not. I mean, whatever.
Maybe also.
It's not my Avoda right now. So there has to be a response. But the question is like everything else. In order to figure out what the Avoda is of any given situation, you first have to answer the question of what is happening. What is the root of whatever the Indian is. And once you have, at least to whatever degree possible, a tfisa, a grasp on the Indian, then you could see what the response should be. Like, are we supposed to go like this or go like that? But you have to first figure out what you're talking about. That's why I said that having Baruch Hashem, not being inundated by that tsar, not just being in survival mode, allows us the presence of mind to investigate and to think about the topic of Sinas Yisrael in a more abstract way, in a more optimistic way. Okay, so I'll share with you an idea. It might sound a little bit strange, but there's always two ways to look at things. When you're looking at something from the eyes of chitzonius, then some things are good, some things are bad. Tziyas das toiv v'ra. Okay. But when you look at things from the lens of pnimius, everything is the Yetzer Chaim. Everything is fixing. Everything is repairing. Everything is working its way back to Gan Eden. That's the perspective. That's not called rosy-colored glasses. That's not called being not realistic. That's pnimius. Pnimius is that everything that exists, everything that's experienced, a part of God's world, and God is good, and He's only doing good. So that means that whatever you're experiencing, in chitzonius, it could be toiv v'ra. In pnimius, it's Yetzer Chaim. So the question when it comes to anti-Semitism, why does it happen, what the response is, for the most part, we probably have heard growing up, whether it was, being told to us because of stories of previous generations or certain things that happened, the Eitzach Das toiv v'ra response, I think we're all familiar with, that these things happen because it runs the gamut from just goyim are bad, to they're jealous of Torah, or whatever. The Rebbeinu Shalom is sending them, he's making them his messengers to send us a message, and our response has to be more Yiddishkeit, more Torah. And that's true. That's within the chitzonius, which is a truth. Eitzadas Torah exists, and it's, that's true. But I think it's kedai to investigate just for a few minutes what it is in pnimius. When we talk about Klal Yisrael and galus, because this phenomenon of Sinas Yisrael is predominantly, it's a galus Indian. So what is galus? So galus is the Jewish people are in exile, right? So we're scattered amongst the nations of the world. But again, in pnimius, everything's a sugya, which means instead of just thinking about galus, meaning that the Jewish people physically are scattered and lost among the nations of the world, we daven Mashiach will come and he'll ingather all the exiles, and it means that even Yidden that are lost, and even though they're Yidden, they'll find their way back. But that's true not only physically of Jewish people. Galus, in a deeper sense, means that Torah Yisrael, that Yiddishkeit, and everything that Torah means is also lost among the nations of the world. So what does that look like? What does that mean? There are certain things that the nations of the world, and Dafka in Galus, whether it be Western civilization or the Middle East and so on, there are certain qualities in Western civilization that are fundamentally moral, fundamentally good. There's a certain sense of morality that Western society is built on. Value system, all that. And again, obviously, and the Muslim, again, even going back to the very religions of the religion of Esau and the religion of Yishmael. Like the Rambam says famously, the end of Malachim, so it was taken out from the censors, but we have, Baruch Hashem, we have it back. And the Rambam said that one of the reasons why the Rebbeinu Shalom allowed these religions to come into existence is because it's definitely an upgrade from old-fashioned pagan idolatry. And when Mashiach does come and the whole world is supposed to be brought back to truth, the concept of mitzvahs and the concept of a one God is not going to be such a shocking idea. So there is truth and there is goodness that's not only within the nations of the world, but is in a certain sense the bedrock of many of the civilizations of the nations of the world. Now, you definitely have pockets of places and things that are just rotten to the core. But b'derech klal, where is that coming from? And this is not so politically correct, but it's the truth. Goodness is the territory of Torah. Goodness and righteousness, mishpat and tzedakah, that is in the world of Torah and only in the world of Torah. Why is it that we find goodness throughout the world? That's called the Torah being in galus. Here's the Nakuda. When the Jewish people are in galus physically, so we're scattered amongst the nations, and then spiritually the same way, mishpat, yashras, tzedakah, chesed, goodness, God, the concept of godliness, the concept of bechira, all these ideas which exist in Yiddishkeit, they are the jurisdiction of Yiddishkeit, and they're also scattered among the nations of the world. And ultimately, The goal of the Jewish people is taka, like the Rambam says at the end of Mishnah Torah. Our Tachlis is not just for us to be an Am Nivcha and Am Segula and let the guy. Our Tachlis is to bring the entire planet with all of humanity under the canopy of Yichud Hashem. Doesn't mean that everyone has to be a Yid, but everyone, Yehudi and Lahavdil and Yehudi, to embrace what it means to be Tzelem Elokim, each one Lefi Madrigasai, to their level and to their shlichus, and to live a just life according to the Ratzon Hashem. That's our goal. But in order for these truths of Yiddishkeit to be healthy enough and strong enough to really uplift even the far-flung corners of human society, they have to find their way back to the proper headquarters within Knesset Yisrael. It's like, I don't know anything much about technology, but we're surrounded with cameras and lights and stuff like that. So there's probably this idea applies to some of the stuff around us, which is that the closer, let's say, the microphone is, whatever it is, to the source, then the stronger the signal, or the stronger the connection. The farther it goes, the less strength the signal is going to have, and the weaker it's going to be. So when you have sparks of Torah, sparks of Elikus, sparks of divinity, that's scattered throughout Western civilization and Eastern civilization and Middle Eastern civilization, you name it. Not only are they scattered, but they are actually now building blocks in the infrastructure of Western civilization and the infrastructure of every religion on the face of the planet at this point, because they haven't been given the proper time within the incubator of Knesset Yisrael to truly find its potency and its strength. So not only are those sparks, now that they're in galus in Western civilization or throughout the world, weak, but they could actually, God forbid, become defiled by the very environment that they're being used to build.
It's the same thing that could happen on the human level.
100%.
A Jew far away from the source is also runs the same risk.
100%.
Now we're talking about a part of the Torah or a value of the Torah,
which is also part of the Jew,
which is part of that big picture of Knesset.
Exactly.
Okay.
So therefore, when we go throughout galus, our goal, amongst other goals, is to try to, when you go to a certain country, every country has its personality, has its certain ethics and moral code and even culture that it's based on. And so when you have Yidden that move to France, right? Galus forces us to go to different countries. You go to France. So all of a sudden, over the years, you become French Jews, right? And the culture, the way of thinking, the mentality of French society. So the Yidden of France pick that up. That's not a bad thing. What's happening over there is that those sparks of truth, of Torah, which are truly in the domain of Torah, and if they were to be found in the womb and in the incubator of Knesset Yisrael, and they would be completely enlivened and enriched by that. But because they're in galus, so now they're enlivening French society, which has good qualities coming from those sparks, but negative qualities as well. When the Jewish people now set up shop in France, and they become, through time, people that are affected by French thinking, I'll just pick that as an example. What's happening on a deeper level is that they're forming that connection with those sparks. And those sparks and those pieces of Torah, those pieces of Elikus, of divinity, the pieces of the Jewish people, all of a sudden feel, that's my chavra. And there's a certain very deep connection that is therefore formed between the Jewish people and the culture and the city and the country that they live in. It's not because of the people, it's not because of the environment or the cuisine, it's because of those sparks, because it's a piece of us. And so the goal is those sparks to then be reabsorbed within Knesset Yisrael, to be invigorated, to be enlivened, to be deepened by that experience, to really, for those sparks, which until now have just been used as just ways of concepts of just being moral and ethical. But when that idea is now reconnected to the main system of Knesset Yisrael, then ethics and morality take on a much deeper experience. It's an experience of godliness. So when those sparks become reincorporated into the collective whole of the Jewish people, they're now given a much deeper strength to then go back out, and not just to then be used as the building blocks of a decent French society. Then they can be used as a way of bringing French society under the canopy of the Shekhinah, which is a whole different experience. So this is where anti-Semitism comes in. Anti-Semitism comes in at that moment when those sparks need to find their way back to us. See, that could happen, that transition from those sparks being, until now, foundational pieces in the infrastructure of that particular society, and they have to move from there to become part of our world, to become invigorated, to then go back out with the coming of Mashiach. So it's not like we're leaving them out in the cold, but it's about them reorienting, those sparks reorienting themselves of what they truly are, so that it has to move from the French culture into the Jewish culture. So that could happen in a number of ways. It could be an easy, smooth transition. The Jewish people go, they begin to speak French, they set up yeshivas, they set up koilim, they set up Beis Yakovs, they set up kosher restaurants, mikvahs, a whole Jewish world, and they start eating French cuisine, they make brachas, and they begin, and they're learning Torah in French, and they sing songs and holy songs in French. And so we're doing what we have to do. And now the Goyim have a choice. One option is, let us live, let us do our thing. And whether they realize it or not, those sparks are finding their way to us in a very smooth and natural way. The other way is either because we're not doing our job quick enough, or whatever the cosmic explanation might be, sometimes the Goyim spit those sparks back at us. And the concept of Sinas Yisrael, when the nations of the world, a particular guy or Goyim, whatever it is, when they begin to hate us, on the outside what's happening is they're just pushing us away. But on the inside what's happening is that they're pushing out of themselves, and the societies that they represent and are a part of, the pushing out of themselves any Jewish vestige of these sparks. And what's happening on a deeper level, if we had the glasses to see, we would see, instead of this guy or these guy and whatever it is, saying whatever it is, or doing whatever they're doing, chas v'shalom, we would be able to see that they're literally handing us back these sparks that until now have been completely enmeshed in their world of Tumah, and giving their world of Tumah some level of yashras and tzedek and mishpat and God consciousness to whatever degree is possible. They're handing it back to us. And while we're cowering and nervous and writing letters to our senators, what we're doing really with those proper glasses is that we're receiving them back. And what we're being charged is, okay, now take those sparks, replant them in Knesset Yisrael deeper and starker. Identify more clearly what the civilization that is expressing anti-Semitism to you is. Identify those nakudas and find them in your Avodas Hashem and purify it, be matar it. Because again, those sparks, eventually they become reabsorbed in the system and become invigorated by that, and they're sent back out with the coming Mashiach to conquer those territories and to bring them back to us, back to the Shekhinah. But they have to go through some level of, they have to be cleaned out a little bit, because they spent, who knows, centuries, thousands of years, it could be by these places. And so they have to go through, there's a tahara that needs to be taken place. And that tahara can only take place within us, within our world, but in a pneumistic avoda.
So in America, what can I have an example? Can we pinpoint something that's out there that needs to reunite?
It's interesting. Even before we get to that, which I think is it's a very important discussion, because see, it's not, we want Mashiach to come daven for us, we're still waiting for that day. There's an avoda. If we accelerate this process, it doesn't mean to make Goyim hate us, but if we accelerate this process of identifying the core elements, the Nitzutze Kedusha, these sparks of Torah that are lost in American society, and we identify them and bring them into the world of our inner neshama, and we double down on, number one, purifying it from its coarseness and from the refuse that it's been stuck in for a very, very long time. So to be matar it and then to invigorate it, it'll make things move much, much quicker and in a healthy way. But I think what's also interesting, what's important to realize even beforehand, is that, listen, what I'm about to say, let me give a little bit of that asterisk before. I'm not a Navi, and I'm not a big fan of people that claim to be Naviim. And I'm not a big fan of people that try to touch up current events and this. We don't know. Whatever truth is in Shammai, by the time it comes down here, it becomes very complicated, and there's a lot of moving parts and intertangled wires. It's very hard to know where things are coming from. But what's interesting is that in the process of Sinas Yisrael, which I've been talking about, which means the Goyim giving us back those sparks. So this is why, by the way, what always happens is that at some point we set up shop in France, right, or whatever the country might be, and we're Matzliach. And then all of a sudden, this crazy king or whatever it is gets a thing in his head, he hates Jews. And eventually we're expelled, right? And we're thinking, like, what did we do wrong? The answer is, Hashem, we did our job. We got all the Tzusik Kedusha out. And what's left behind, by the way, is usually a country that usually falls apart and only is put back together when slowly but surely Jews come back. Because when Jews come back, it means it's a siman that there's still maybe some residual sparks that need to be taken out. There's only one place. And even this it's a sugya how to understand this. There's only one place that no sparks remain behind. And everything was absolutely cleared out. That's Mitzrayim. And that's why there's a mitzvah not going back to Mitzrayim. There's no reason for it. It's completely cleaned out.
Nothing more.
Nothing left. Every other country until Mashiach comes, even if we excavate out all the sparks, there might be some sparks of sparks remaining behind. And it's Bashkacha Pratis, by the way. Which Jew is being sent to which country at which time? It's Bashkacha Pratis, because whatever country you're in, what you're really trying to do is redeem a piece of yourself. Because these sparks, which is a piece of Torah, is a piece of the Jewish people. We are Torah. We are Elikos. We are divinity. A piece of every single one of us is scattered throughout galus. And so we're being charged to find those pieces. So Hashem sends us to exactly where we're supposed to be. We are American for a reason, right? But it means that our avodah is, again, like you said, to identify the Nikud of America, incorporate it into Knesset Yisrael as best as we possibly can, clean it out from the effects of being stuck in America for so long, and then go weiter. I think what's interesting, though, now, which is an interesting thing, again, I'm not a big expert in anything, and certainly not in current events, but from the little that I do here, is that a lot of the anti-Semitism now is wrapped up in also Western society, Khal, rejecting everything that it thought of until now. And so, right and wrong, and everything that was until now is an assumption of what a person is and who we are, which are the bedrocks of Western civilization. There's a significant part of Western civilization that are trying to actively reject these ideas or question them. There's great tikkunim that are probably taking place. I mean, everything is a tikkun, but most likely part of what's happening is that, you see, there are certain sparks that in Western society, there's like layers, and so like the top layer of sparks, easy to take off, but then you get to like the mamish, the core, the bedrock of Western society, which are based on certain truths. And if it's a truth, it's part of Knesset Yisrael. So those sparks also need to be redeemed. So in order for those sparks to be redeemed, you got to get to and when those sparks are being taken out, then what's happening to that society is that it starts beginning to question its very essence, its very core. The most fundamental beliefs that until now were absolutely unquestioned, all of a sudden are questioned. To me, that's a good thing.
Can I give you an example of this?
Mm-hmm.
Like one of the guys at the forefront of this, one of the most famous guys,
Yeah.
He's a guy that believes that the earth is flat.
That's just an Amar. It's just
okay. But there's a people out there that like, and he's a guy, what everyone's telling him about the world is that it's round. He's questioning whether or not that's true. I'm sure he's questioning other things also about society.
It's like a guy that believes that the earth is round, people are worried about his opinion about other things.
This is the world we live in.
Okay. Here, okay.
It's a very flat world that they're paying attention to him. But in the end of the day, he's influential. But I'm saying he's also questioning. So it's just interesting to me that Rebbe's saying it this way.
It's coming from the same place. You have to understand, the Torah of Mashiach, the Torah of Gula, is not just the Torah that we have a little bit better or a little bit more. We're talking about a complete upgrade of the entire thing. The Torah of Mashiach is not a Torah that's built on any piece of an old Torah. Everything of the old Torah has to be, it's not being recreated, Chas v'shalom, but enriched. The deeper, more enriched structure of Yiddishkeit, of Geula, cannot remain on an underdeveloped, unriched foundation of the galus of the Torah of galus. It doesn't work like that. The whole thing has to be not redesigned, but enriched, and spend some time in in the womb of Knesset Yisrael to allow this rebirth of the Torah of Gula. And so even those very foundational sparks, which until now have been the basic foundation of every normal thinking person on planet Earth, we can't have a Yiddishkeit built on that foundation. The foundation itself has to be redesigned almost in a certain sense to be a foundation for Torah Sagula. And so those sparks also have to find their way to us. So it's not a matter of sitting and waiting for that to happen, but it means that we have to think for ourselves to be able to have deeper eyes and to not take any concept for granted. Not take any concept for granted. It means that there's no such thing of like, there's anyway 1 + 1 is 2. That's a truth. And then, okay, now I think about God in other areas. No. 1 + 1 = 2 is a consciousness, is a concept that the Ribono Shel Olam is creating and putting in your head as a truth right now. To be able to see any truth as part of Elikus. And the question then is, not 1 + 1 is 2 is a given, granted, and Avodas Hashem is in other areas. No. Why is the Ribono Shel Olam telling me right now 1 + 1 is 2? What does that mean in Avoda? Okay, whatever, that's just, But the idea is that if we can begin to look at the world around us and not take anything for granted or at face value, das is das, finished. And then I serve the Ribono Shel Olam and I look for a deeper thing in other areas. And then if we can look at everything in this way, anything that's true is a spark of Elikus, and it's a piece of Torah, and therefore it's telling us something about ourselves and telling us something about how to serve the Ribono Shel Olam right now, then that's a way of us going through this process without it being so difficult for people. Again, from the perspective of Pneumius, it's all tikkunim. It's all tikkunim.
So we're watching things fall into place, or a grinding that's happening as things are falling into place.
Right, but we can't sit back passively. The idea is, as I said, like once we identify what the Indian is, so now to try to accelerate it and to connect to it in a pneumistic way, in a way of Avodas Hashem. So it's looking at what's going on, understanding what's happening, and then reacting to it in terms of like, okay, the Ribono Shel Olam is telling you something. He's telling you that there are certain sparks that it's their time. It's their time to be redeemed. And so if we just sit back and allow it to happen on their own timetable, then it usually comes with difficulties. Chas v'shalom. But if we look at those things that are moving, those bricks that are on the foundational points of Western society that are shaking, and why are they shaking? Because they're being magnetically pulled to Knesset Yisrael. So instead of sitting back and waiting for that to happen, think about those ideas and incorporate them into your Avodas Hashem, and to learn about those sugyas and to see what is Ribono Shel Olam telling you? What is it about these ideas in your own life that until now have been immature, underdeveloped, disconnected from Avodas Hashem? The Ribono Shel Olam is telling us something, and so our job is to identify which sparks at any given point in time are shaking, are beginning to move to us, and to figure that out in terms of what it means for your personal life and your Avodas Hashem and Pneumius, and serve Hashem accordingly. How do you know which sparks are shaking? Anti-Semitism is one way. Whenever there's anti-Semitism, it means that the Goyim are they're saying that we don't want these sparks anymore, right? And also upheaval in the world and Khal, society questioning certain core values which until now have not been questioned. These are sparks that the Ribono Shel Olam is showing to us that these sparks are trying to make their way back to us. And so we have to embrace that.
Can I hear an example? A good
example.
Something that's happening out there that is telling us a specific thing without nevuah.
I'll tell you one thing. Whether this is true or not, I don't know. Again, like I said, you have to be an Navi to really know. I don't know. All I can say is what I feel for myself. And you probably have to be a little bit more of a historian also, just in the world to appreciate.
There is a bigger context here.
Yeah, for sure. Right. Which I'm not, so I don't know. But I think a lot of where this upheaval is coming from in the world around us, and the questioning of these core inyanim that we all know, without even having to say, because we all know what we're talking about. A lot of it is coming from Yish. It's like World War II, for example, was a big event. World War I, World War II. So it was extremely traumatizing for the Jewish people. But looking back, it probably was extremely traumatizing for the rest of the world, because you see, for centuries, the world believed that these sparks, I'm not saying, they wouldn't say these words, but these sparks of Torah and of truth that became building blocks of their world, they believed for centuries that it was theirs and that they were capable of truly becoming elevated people because of them. Comes World War I and World War II. It's not just about Germany. The world realized that with all of its development and with all of its sophistication in science and technology and ethics and morality and all those sparks that they've been building edifices of civilization upon, the same behemoths, the same barbaric behemoths. And Adarab, all the sophisticated technologies and so on were used for their barbarism. So this is terrible for us. Obviously, it was Tsar Shein Kamoi. You can't even talk about World War II. But what does that leave when all the dust settles? Because there's time to recover and rebuild. It changed the whole planet. But when all the dust settles, what's left behind is a world that has lost all of its faith in itself. All of its faith in itself. It doesn't believe anymore that it's capable of living as its own Malakim. And so now when you have that, you have, as a world, you have a few options. Either, okay, so you embrace it and you go back to being just a barbaric behemoth living in the jungle. Pasnisht. And that's not what human beings are also. So there are individuals that do that. But as a society, the world it's not appealing. That's one option. The other option is to commit collective suicide and say, listen, there's nothing that we can do to better ourselves, and all that we are is just a plague on the planet, because the more that we go, the more we destroy the trees, the more we destroy the ozone layer, and we're not worth our value. We're probably not worth our value. All of that is coming because of this collective understanding. We realize now that with all our religions, and with all our ethics, and all our brains and hearts, we cannot get away from evil. We can't get away from barbarism, from chaos, from Torah. We can't do it. So it's really, we just want to put a gun to our heads and just end our misery for our sake and for the world's sake. Because we're just messing up a world for rabbits. It's Rahmanis on the rabbits. They have people making their lives crazy. So that's an option, and that's something that already Western civilization kind of has chosen. A certain percentage of them, which is they don't necessarily have the guts to literally take their lives, but to create a philosophical culture which is self-loathing, that hates itself.
You don't even have a right to exist.
You're just taking up space, and really the trees have more of a right to exist than you. And in their way of thinking, I hear, because trees aren't causing any problems, they're not bothering anyone else. So they're better than you. Chazal say such a thing, right? Chazal say that if a human being doesn't live the way he's supposed to live, then yitish kadumcha, then a gnat is better than you, right? The human being was created at the end, because if you don't live like a tzal malakim, you're no better than a behemoth, you're worse than a behemoth. And then there's another path, which is just yish. I'm not going to allow myself to think about anything deeper, because if I allow myself to think about anything deeper, then all of a sudden I know that I'm supposed to be living deeper, and I know I can't. So I'm just going to shut off. And that's another part of Western civilization, and the world also, I'm not just saying Western because we're Americans, we're talking about that. But all of this self-loathing, self-hatred, hating human beings, hating humanity, hating the concepts of good and evil, hating the very ideas of truth, it's all coming from Yish, because they don't believe as a collective world that they can live up to it. And they have a good reason to believe that. V'haraya, World War I, World War II. But it's all Yish. It's all Yish. It's all Yish. That's why the world is ripe and Mom is ready for Khal Yisrael to stand with Jewish pride and to scream out, Ein Yish B'Olam Klal. Because that's exactly what people need to hear. In a sophisticated way, to understand that it's taka true. The sparks of truth and of justice and of righteousness that have been the core building blocks of your societies have not been able to enliven you and bring you to a place of godliness.
They don't
and
get
that's
you to
true.
the finish line. No
They
matter
can't.
how far advanced you
That's
get, they
true.
don't get you there.
They won't, because they have to be given the time to incubate and to reconnect to their true source in Knesset Yisrael. And in Knesset Yisrael, those sparks will be able to give you everything you need. They'll be able to give you everything you need. You want to become an elevated person. You want to be able to get finally past your barbarism and your inyanim. You can do it. You can do it. And the sparks that you've been using until now, they can do that for you. But it has to be through Knesset Yisrael. And that takes two things. It takes the nations of the world to be willing to hear. But even more so, it takes us to realize this within ourselves and to realize how much we have to offer and then to actually say it. Listen, it's a complicated sugya because there's a lot of baggage that we have with them and they have with us. It's a lot of baggage. But at the end of the day, this is what's going on. All the tsaris, all the upheaval, all this, it's just yish. It's just yish. And that fundamental nitzutz, the most fundamental spark that all of this is residing on, which is hope and belief that we're created by God, connected to God, and we have the ability to become godlike, that is shaking. That is shaking. And that's no longer a stable foundational rock for society to reside on. And it's been beginning to shake probably ever since the wars, World War I, World War II. And so you're asking me, like, what's a spark, for example, that we can be mechazik? I mean, if you want to get to the very, very kishkas, I think this is one of the most elemental and fundamental sparks that's been shaking for some time. And that's where Reb Nachman, we talked about, don't be miyash, don't be miyash, don't be miyash. And he was talking in 17, whatever, to a few tzaddikim in the middle of Ukraine. And everyone around was like, what are you talking? Years.
Who's giving up?
Who's giving up? He was talking to the world. He was talking to us. And again, it's the idea of incorporating that spark of hope, of confidence, of positivity. Realize that foundational spark that's been until now in galus, and it's been in such a galus that it hasn't even been noticeable until now. Because that's the oimek of galus, where you didn't even know that it was in galus. You didn't even know that it existed.
It's a concept in disguise. A Jew in the middle of
You
nowhere in disguise.
didn't even know it was Jewish, right?
Don't even know.
So this very idea of it being a sugya, of it being a bedrock, a foundational point that all of society is built on, wasn't even thought of until it begins to shake. And so, to me, one of the Nyan the Rebbeinu Shalom is screaming to us at the end of time is, like Reb Nachman said, Ein liyash. And it means that even in your life, it means that's what I meant before. Take this, identify a spark that's shaking, that's being thrust to the Jewish people, and find that spark in your own life and enliven it and reincorporate it into your Avodas Hashem and figure out a way how to give more strength to that spark.
So when Rabbi's talking about hope and yish, it means
when,
even believing that I'm part of a process of getting closer to something. Like there's a point.
I'm saying even smaller than that. I'm saying even more specific than that. The fact that you don't give up on yourself and you continue to daven mincha and you daven to Hashem about a certain thing and you haven't been answered all these years, but you continue to not give up hope and do more. That's a piece of that spark that you're fixing within yourself, that you're bringing into that incubator of Knesset Yisrael. Means whatever means in your personal life of Ein Liyash, you do that. Double down on that. Double down on that. Ein Liyash begashmias, Ein Liyash liruchnias, Ein Liyash in refuas. Whatever the Ein Liyash is, you learned the Mishnah, you don't understand it. Ein Liyash, try to learn it again. Whatever Ein Liyash means, you're helping the whole world, because it seems to me that is the most fundamental spark that all of civilization is resting on, and that's shaking.
That's really the deepest point.
I think so. But that's a good siman. Because when that spark is fully fixed, then you can rebuild.
That's exactly why it's shaking.
Yeah.
We're getting closer. And so the foundation itself is shaking.
Exactly. And again, that's the galus itself. Don't be miyash. It's all tikkunim.
It reminds me, Rabbi Nachman in Torah Aleph, about the chaim.
Sure.
Just those first few words.
100%.
Just beauty.
100%.
It's out there and it's lost.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Is that the idea? That's the idea.
100%.
And we have to reunite it. We have to get to the true beauty. You take the thing that's out there and that the world is built on.
Chain is hope. Hope is chain. Why do kids have chen? Because they haven't been bashed by life yet, as Hashem. So they're just full of hope. That's chen. Chen, Reb Nachman said, has been in galus among the nations of the world for a very long time. And Reb Nachman, the first Likutei Moharan, it has to be somehow connected to the famous statement of Reb Nachman, which is about Ein Li'ayish, because that's exactly what it is. And so we're living that right now. Like I said, I'm not a Navi, I don't know. But to me, that spark of tikva, of hope, only began to shake in relatively recent history. And so to me, that's a good simon.
I think this is like a great starting point for a conversation.
Okay, there you go.
I think we have a lot more work to do, but connecting it to hope and connecting it to these things is practical. You can work on that. You can work on that in many different areas. Thank you very much.
To you and talking.